it's this ongoing, on-growing, on-developing, experience ever since then. And even now I still get new revelations. I mean, part of the reason I like doing these interviews is it gets me to think about it more and to grow more and learn more from what happened, because it was beyond my understanding, beyond my comprehension, definitely. There's something kind of magical and special about sharing it, and it is impossible to put into words what happened. But we try, because then you can share the spirit of it and share the energy of it, the hope, the loving, the healing, all that part is what's really important. My near-death experience was this majestic, wonderful experience, but really what matters more is what happened after. But I'll go through the story, because people do like to hear that. So I was at the time living in Colorado in the United States, and I came back east in the Rye Brook, New York, just a bit north of New York City, to visit my parents. And I went to a party of a young lady that I knew from high school. Part of it's kind of funny, because I had asked I was definitely there drinking and stuff, and I asked my friend to drive me home, kind of pretending I was a little higher than I thought I was, really, so I could leave my car there and go back the next day and talk to the woman, because I was trying to connect her with her at the party, and she was busy hosting, and it was so loud. And when I was almost back, I was staying at my parents'. When I was almost back there, I realized my sister needed the car the next morning for her to go to work. So I told my friend to take me back to the party. And he said, "I thought you were too, high to drive." And I explained what I was doing and why I left my car there. But I was too high to be driving. But he took me back to the party. I remember walking towards the door, leaving the party, and I still have the vision in my mind of seeing the people, and in the way when you get too high and things look a little too colorful and a little hazy. I was in my 20s. It was during the 1970s. People didn't really weren't as careful back then as driving while drinking. I remember walking towards the door to leave the party. The next thing I remember was I was out of my body, surrounded by white light. I looked down. Where I was, it was all white, and where the car was, it was really smashed, and my body was leaning against a tree. There was a police officer crouching over me. When I went back to look at the car after, I just couldn't even imagine how I survived. And not that long ago, someone said, "Yes, something kind of mystical and magical must have happened to get you out of the car." I just always assumed the police officer pulled me out, but I don't know what happened. So it just made me think, because the car was so smashed, there wasn't room in there for a body. So what happened to me, it was white here. Behind me, there was like a big circle of white, and within that white, there was a white being, just all white. And with energy radiating off of that in a different shade of white. I don't know how long it lasted, but the part of it was just a very feeling, and this part of the feeling and knowing is something I've been exploring all these years. And recently I had a whole new revelation of, while I'm meditating, of almost how addicted we are to seeing things and having words in our mind to explain things, and this is beyond that. So I got to this new level, and I've known what I just said for a long time, but this was like a whole new level. I really need to let go of understanding what happened to go higher and higher. So, and that experience was there. It felt so... people say, "Did you have a body?" I didn't think of it. It felt like I had a body. Someone asked me, "So you could see behind you?" I didn't even think of that. It's like I just knew what was behind me. I just knew I was a part of it and knew everything. And then the voice from this being behind me said, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." I knew right at that moment that that father was God, not my physical father. So I went back into my body, and came 2-3 days later in the hospital. The feeling and knowing, it's almost like instantaneous. Again, this happened, I'm 67. It happened when I was 22, so many years ago. I'm still trying to figure out how to get the right words and explore that experience inside of me. Sometimes people have asked me, did you have a choice about going back? It just, everything seemed so right and felt so good. When I was told to go back, I just went, where I was felt good, but it also seemed like everything on the earth made sense and everything was so right. Mine was in the 1970s, and that, it wasn't like people were talking about it. I had this phenomenal experience, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And a lot of that happened after. Things just have ever since then been lining up for me to be more spiritual, meet people. And something happened. So I was living in Colorado then, and I was back in New York. I did go back to Colorado for a little while, and my mom kind of convinced me and bribed me and to move back east and get into my dad's electrical contracting business. So one day I was sitting in my apartment and someone knocks on the door. Again, 1970s. Now, no one comes into my, no one, almost never does someone show up without me knowing who it is because of cell phones. But someone knocked on the door. I didn't think anything of it. I got up to answer. And there was this beautiful woman at the door. She told me she was a sister of a good friend of mine from Colorado, one of the few people that I mentioned my near-death experience to. And this woman said, my sister told me these cool things about you. It ended up her sister told her about my near-death experience. And this woman was very involved with spiritual studies with this Sufi sheikh. And she told me about this guy and introduced me to this Sufi sheikh. And so he's, Sufism is part of the Islamic religion. I'm Jewish, so, I didn't really know what Sufism was back then, but it was a little funny. But as soon as she mentioned this person, I felt a connection. Islamic, Judaism, he started to talk to me about Mary and Jesus, and like these words just lit up inside of me, connecting to my experience, the love. He talked about, so after this I found out Mary is a big part of the Islamic religion, which I didn't know. But her love and openness to God and the Christ light coming in, I was like, wow, that's what I experienced. And when he started to talk to me about Jesus, I just knew that being behind me was Jesus telling me to go back. I knew I had the experience right away, but like I said, the process of knowing what to think about it took a while. So some of it started then, and I guess in a certain way, not knowing has been the impetus for my life of realizing I can never know, and I want to know more and more. So, nowadays people have an experience like that. They go, oh, I heard about that. For me, I didn't know anything about it. I did not know what to make of it. I didn't really talk to too many people about it at all, and it was this amazing experience, but in a certain way, well, so what? What do you even do? So I started to notice, something that definitely happened that was very physical, and I didn't have to really figure out, well, I was trying to figure out what it meant, but when I would touch people, my hands became very warm right away. So that was something, my intuition increased, my sense of loving increased. There were things that increased, but again, I didn't know what to make of them. Even, you're talking about being spiritual. I wasn't even thinking of being spiritual. So it took a while of meeting these different people, and they would talk about it. And people didn't even talk about near-death experience, but I started learning about what happens after we die. So I've really dedicated my life to exploring my healing abilities. The thing that was good about my hands getting warm, it was something very concrete, and it wasn't there. There was no denying it whatsoever, because not just I noticed it, and actually when I touch people, to me it almost feels like they're getting hot, and to them it feels like my hands are getting hot, and that still happens. And something was happening. I didn't know what to think about it. Yeah, and I did that for a long time. Now I work with people, without touching them and doing the healing that way. I've made it my life's purpose to learn intellectually as well as in my heart and spiritually. I think everyone has a gift, and I do think certain gifts are brought to the forefront for people who have near-death experiences, but even people who don't, they should explore those spiritual gifts inside of them. It makes it a lot easier when your body's kind of out of the picture and all these urges and thoughts and stuff aren't there, so you get to experience just being your soul without the other aspects. I'm not afraid of what happens after. I definitely obviously don't want to suffer in the process. And in one way, my near-death experience was kind of easy because I didn't experience the car accident. My body definitely had aches and pains. And you said you didn't have a scratch. I have this scar. It goes all the way back because my head was smashed open. There's other things in my body that didn't hurt that much, but my chest was banged up. I had this bruise the shape of the steering wheel on my chest. I'm not afraid of what happens after we die. I feel like it's a beautiful thing. Like I said, I remember going to walk out of the party, not even walking out of the door. As I say that, it's like I see little flashes or something, maybe walking to my car. The next thing I knew, I was out of my body, looking down, looking at the world like everything was perfect. Just everything seems so perfectly right. That's the main thing. And just it was kind of getting glimpses of understanding the human dilemma and, just knowing that things were good. Even looking at my body and just not having an emotional reaction, just looking, oh yeah, and it wasn't even really verbal thoughts like the way I really think. It was just this knowing that everything was good. That was the main thing. In the beginning, I only told a few people, I even mentioned it. And then it wasn't that long before this woman showed up at my door and I got introduced to this Sufi sheikh. And he had a near-death experience, and we didn't even use that word. And a number of people who studied with him did too. So we talked about it. I wasn't so much talking about what happened to me, but this is what we were being taught about, like what happens after we leave our body, like what is, learning about the soul and doing meditations to be in that place and connect to those higher levels. The basic thing that I do is a meditation. Actually, on my YouTube, it's called the Basic Soul Meditation that describes how to do that. It is ongoing work because, in one way, I'm not sure always how to describe it, but I would like to think I reached the highest level in my near-death experience. And like I said, just recently I had a whole new understanding of these levels. So I'm always working and knowing I have to keep going and going and going. But that was, and there are, that wasn't so much talking about my experience as it was as learning about my experience and learning what these teachers. So there were other teachers also I came across. The next thing that came up about talking about it, which was a few years ago, I was teaching a class at the University of Bridgeport on mindfulness meditation. And after the class, the woman who kind of sponsored me and set up and was a teacher there, she said she was teaching a class on, I think it was called Living and Dying or Death and Dying. And it was basically a class that looked at different traditions and, how they go through the process of dying and the rituals and stuff they do. And I said to her, I had heard of near-death experience, but it wasn't like, I didn't know people were really talking about it. So I said to her, I had a near-death experience. And she got so excited. And she said, you have to come talk to my class? I said, okay. And then I just put something on Facebook saying, I just finished my class so I would go to the class and teach a couple of, like once a year I'd go for like a day and teach a few classes and do a workshop, teach, sometimes to graduate students about breathing and mindfulness and all that stuff. And I posted something on Facebook saying, and I'm going to be teaching this class on death and dying. And so many people said, I didn't know that happened to you. I'm interested. And really I thought, oh, this is a great way to share about what I do, because I've been doing this healing work and teaching workshops and things for all these years, and it was like, this is really what it was about. But I never talked to anyone about it until then. I taught this class, I videotaped it. It got thousands of views on YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. And I just realized it's a way of sharing the gift more directly. Like it's growing for me. People hear it. They're inspired. They're, people who are afraid of death sometimes, they let that go. And it's just such an uplifting thing, that I just love to talk about it. And ever since then, I've been sharing about it as much as I can. The meditation for that is a little different. There is a part of it that's mindful, but the chanting part and the listening, there's a part of doing this HU chant, H-U, and that you chant, usually you want to chant it internally, and then you're listening, and this sound and this energy comes in, and it just sort of starts to pull you up there. There's part of it where you can focus on your heart or your third eye and do some mindfulness in there too, but it is trying to get in this place to connect into this energy that just pulls you. This happens to most people naturally sometimes. When we're sleeping, sometimes, if you ever just kind of space out and feel like you're in a dreamy place, I think some of that's happening. But to consciously initiate it and make a practice and strengthen those skills is something I started to practice after. So I started, and not till after meeting the teacher, and that was part of the meditation that we did. And I've met other teachers that do similar kinds of very similar kinds of meditation. I've come to a realization that there was higher than I really realized in my near-death experience. So, no, I think there is always higher to go. I just don't think, I think there's definitely higher for me, and I'm always looking for that. I don't know quite how to describe it, but what happened recently was I had a new, like the image of the what different white lights around me. It was all of a sudden like, wow, I'm really attached to how my mind works, even though I've done work for 40 years how to not be attached to that. It was like a new level of letting go, of needing to understand the words and having a specific image that relates to the physical world in my meditation, that it's like beyond that. And then there's like a letting go there, and part of me, my mind like starts to almost panic because there's like almost nothing there except for this. It's kind of abstract, but sometimes it looks a little purplish, but it is this incredible loving and caring and joy. A smile comes on my face, and even that part, it's my mind trying to understand. Then it's like, oh, just let go of that part and just keep going. Sometimes I say I knew, but even saying you knew is too much because it's the process of knowing, and then it's like, well, was I just a part of it? And even that's like too much of a reference to the physical level to describe what it is. So it's like kind of knowing everything at one time, but no need to know anything. It's kind of feeling that wonderful thing, but no need, like you don't even have to check to see if you feel it or know it. It just is what it is, and right, there's no way to describe it. I mean, one of the teachers I met would say, just talking inherently about it is lying, because there's no way to describe it. We have to use the words, and then people get the spirit of it, and it's kind of like, what's the message behind the words as opposed to actually the words. When I work with people, there's part of it of kind of understanding why spiritually they're going through what they're going through, but even that, and then I try to talk to them about it, and they start to almost feel guilty that, like, for whatever, whether it's an illness or a problem or whatever it is, like it's their fault. And I try to say, no, that's not what it is, because it's this understanding from this place that is so understanding, so forgiving, so loving, that you don't have to think of understanding or forgiving or loving. It just is. There's nothing on the physical level that is so definitely there that you could describe it. But once they connect, and that's what I do for myself, connect to this energy of this loving and knowing and understanding and this wonderfulness, then healing starts to take place for me, for them. You get to connect into the spirit. It's just a beautiful thing, you know. I was in the electrical contracting business for a while after my near-death experience, and but something was always itching inside of me, and I started this, you know, it was kind of exploring. Like I said, it wasn't like look on the internet about what happened and find out the answer. So it was kind of meeting people, learning, exploring, and so it wasn't like all of a sudden I knew exactly what to do, because it had to unfold in me, because my mind was telling me to go to work, you know what I mean? And but yeah, something was urging me, pulling me, pushing me, however you describe it, to, and now my life is about my spiritual stuff, doing good. I do a lot of volunteer work. I help people in my practice. I work with the local schools. I, you know, involved with churches, and, you know, just help people and do good things. It's like on a mission from God, but I'm not totally sure what that mission is, but I know it is doing good things. One time I had this experience. This was a friend of mine who I'd known for many years, was very sick, and it worked out. I had been in touch with her, you know, on and off for over a few years. I wasn't planning on going to visit her in the hospital, but she was in, I think it was in Brooklyn or in the Bronx, I forget. But it worked. My daughter wanted to go to a Broadway show, and she was going with some other people, not me. So I brought her into the city and dropped her off, and I had a few hours, and I knew I could go see this woman, and I went there, and she was so happy to see me. Like, her family was there. I had known her since I'm a, you know, young kid, and her mother knew me, and it was like it was interesting, because she was like, her family was almost guilting her out of dying, you know what I mean? And it was like obviously time for her to go. So I went there. She asked me to work on her a little. She was familiar with my work. And it just balanced her system and got her ready. And just me knowing, you know, you can know this stuff, but the physical world is not about knowing this stuff. And there's people's energy. And so it was really helpful for her to be able to connect with me. And it's funny, her mom wanted me to leave because there was only a certain amount of passes for visiting in the hospital. And this woman was so weak, and she stood up and grabbed my arm and said, "Stay," in this really strong voice, out of, you know, almost from hardly being able to talk. So I stayed with her. And then she just, you know, I could tell she was kind of ready to pass. And then, so I left right then, because you know, her mom was really urging to leave. But it's more of this heart to heart knowing, or soul to soul, that you just know everything's okay, and you see the goodness and the glory in that person, and know that they're going to that goodness and glory. From what I do, a lot of times people are passing, and so you help them do that. And obviously you want to try to save them. If they start to work with me soon enough, a lot of times it can save. I mean, I've had people that their life had been extended for years, even though they came to me when they were very sick. Being real and honest is important. I mean, I'm very educated and have degrees and stuff, so that helps a lot. But it's definitely spiritual, and I've done a lot of spiritual studies. That helps. But you know, it's funny, because some years ago, when I was reluctant to start officially doing what I do, I said to this person, she said, "Why don't you start your practice?" I said, "I don't know what to call what I do." She said, "Just call it a session. What's the difference?" And I realized, yeah, you know, you be honest and real, and you speak from your heart, and that's what you do. And you figure out, you know, some of it is you want to put it in words that people understand, but again, it's the word, it's the spirit behind it, and you put yourself out there, and it's being vulnerable. You know, it's not easy. The part of really honoring what happened during my near-death experience inside of me is, it's not an easy task to live that way and be, you know, be ruthlessly truthful, ruthless about your spirituality, and be true to yourself in a way that don't let what other people think or what they do get in the way. And it's like, well, this is what I do, and you see what happens, you know. And some of it is you put it out, you see what happens, you put it out more, you see what happens. So you know, you got to come up with the words for yourself, And, I've been doing this a long time, so I do, and I almost always say to people, there's no way to put into words what I do or what the experience is, and then right away they say, oh, I get it. Whatever you feel a connection to, you pursue it to whatever level, and you start to learn, and, you can learn from other people. You can learn from everybody, but there are people in these different schools of thoughts, the religious part, the martial arts, whatever it is, people who are really doing, really putting their heart and soul into what they do are phenomenal people. And you can learn from them. And the more you learn, the more you can do. And take care of yourself. Do the things. That's always what I want to say. The meditation, I think journal writing is really important, but those things, do those spiritual practices every day, take care of your body, and so you can do your best to present and manifest God's gifts that you have in the world. And do what, we're talking about spiritual things, but being a cook, being an artist, being, someone who cleans stuff, you know what I mean? Anything can be God's gift, and that energy, that soul can come through it, and you're a blessing to everyone and everything.